Aislinn. Welcome back to Collection Cut Down. If you'd like a bit more information about what that is, I have linked the introduction and explanatory video up here and down here. But the TLDR version is that I have loads of DVDs and I'm rewatching them all and reviewing them to see if I want to keep them. Today's video is on 10 Things I Hate About You. It's a bit of a change of pace because my first two movies were action movies, so I'm looking forward to doing a rom-com, particularly one as classic as this. For those who don't know, 10 Things I Hate About You is a modern day teen version of The Taming of the Shrew by Shakespeare, and 1999, absolute classic for my generation. I used to watch this movie a lot as a teenager. I loved it, and a lot of that was to do with Julia Stiles' character. I related a lot to her, and Heath Ledger was very charming, and even today I see lots of people still post GIFs and videos and clips from this. So it obviously still means a lot to a lot of people, and so I haven't seen it for a long time though, and that is because I tend to struggle separating art and artist, and sometimes that means that the artist is problematic, so I don't want to consume their art anymore, and sometimes it means that when an actor dies, like Heath Ledger did, I get very sad, and I get very sad when I watch their stuff. So I haven't seen many of Heath Ledger's films since he passed, and so this is going to be interesting for me to revisit. I think I'm still going to like it. I think there's no getting around that. I remember it being very charming, but you know, maybe some other emotions will overshadow that for me, and that's going to be really interesting to see. I'm pretty sure the only two Heath Ledger movies I've seen since he passed away were Brokeback Mountain and The Dark Knight. And they're not really meant to be happy comedy type things, and I think that that's why I was okay with seeing them. So this, I might have a different reaction to that, particularly because it's meant to be fun and funny and all of that. So yeah, let's see how we go. So the things that I remember best about the film and I'm most looking forward to seeing again, as I said, Julia Stiles' character was certainly a big part of it, and their banter together, that scene at the end in the poetry class, still iconic. The things that I'm less sure that I enjoyed then and don't know if I'll enjoy now, I feel like maybe the Joseph Gordon-Levitt plotline is maybe a little bit more problematic. I get a vague impression that I wasn't so keen on the scene in the car with his love interest, the sister character. So I will see how that goes for me. As I've said before, I've changed a lot, and so have my tastes and my views on the world, and so this might be one of those times I'm actually confronted with that, and we will see. You know, I think it's been about 10 years since I've seen this film, and I am interested to see if it's still as wonderful as I remember, or if that's enough distance for me to be able to see its flaws. I'm always a huge fan of Shakespeare adaptations, whether of the time or more modern ones. In fact, I think I might even prefer the modern ones, even though I love period pieces. So this is one of the ultimate kind of updatings of the classic. We will eventually talk about another adaptation of Taming of the Shrew, which is another modern one, but that's a long way off under tea. So, yeah, I do wish there was more adaptations of Shakespeare. There did seem to be a run of them in the 90s, and it's a shame that kind of disappeared a bit. I don't actually have a lot of them in my collection because most of them were the tragedies, and I'm not a huge fan of tragedies. But some of his comedies did get adapted as well, so a few of them will pop up throughout this channel, and it'll be interesting to compare all the different adaptations. I do wonder if everybody else in the world got this on the DVD cover. Is Australia's Heath Ledger a big draw for everybody else, or is that just the Australian copy? 10 Things I Hate About You. It's 94 minutes long, so I'm gonna see you guys on the other side. This movie is so delightful. I'd almost forgotten how much so and why. The script is great, the acting is great, the characters are great, the music choices are great. I mean, how can you really go wrong? I am glad that I wasn't overly sad by watching Heath Ledger again, because he's just so wonderful in this, and it's really just nice to see such a talented actor again. You know, I'd kind of missed his presence, so it was really nice. But as always, the main draw in this film for me is Kat. I think that she's a good role model for teenage girls, particularly in the way that she ultimately cares for her sister and, you know, her determination not to do things just because other people expect it of her or other people are doing it. And, you know, that's really admirable, and it's really hard to do when you're a teenage girl, so she's fabulous. And Julia Stiles plays her so well. I, you know, really liked her attitude in it, that she sort of softened some of Kat's rough edges. I love all the little character details in this film. So, you know, I've talked before saying that building a character with not much screen time is really tough, and this film does it so well. You get a feel for all of the secondary characters, you know, who they are, what kind of person they are, what they believe in, everyone from the guidance counselor, the dad. It's so clever in the way that it's scripted, you know? So there's the scenes with the guidance counselor where she's writing a romance novel. As a romance novelist, I was prepared to be upset by that scene, but honestly, they are so affectionate with the way they poke fun that I don't actually mind. That kind of thing, you don't see details like that in many films, and that's really the key, I think, to building a character in a short amount of time. You really want to give them very unique quirks, and so, you know, the guidance counselor is probably the most obvious example, but even the the golf instructor, who's also a father, I think, and so the scene where all the kids arrive at his house for the party, and so, you know, you get such a sense of his character even though he's only in 2 scenes, and that kind of thing is clever. There are so many classic scenes in this. I think the singing one where Heath Ledger serenades Julia Stiles' character is probably the one that I see most often crossing my Twitter timeline, but I also love the paintball scene. I love the scene where all of the scenes when she's in poetry class. I think they may actually be my favourite. Particularly that scene at the end when she reads her poem. I cried this time as well. I think Julia Stiles' acting in that moment is so great, and I really feel for that character. just putting herself on the line like that, and it's kind of heartbreaking and totally sweet and romantic to do that big gesture, and I love it. I think it's a perfect way to end the film. I do think that the film is mostly excellent on one thing that teenage films of this era often didn't get right, and that's consent. So the scene where he won't kiss her because she's drunk is wonderful, and I'm so glad that they put that in there. And it kind of, you know, makes me much swoonier for Patrick's character. So the scene where she flashes the teacher kind of is even more uncomfortable in that context. Like, you're thinking, oh, this is really good, you know, great role models, all that kind of stuff. And then, you know, particularly in this day and age, you've heard some stories, and so anything teacher-student's a big no for me. And obviously they weren't doing that, they weren't going in that direction, but you know, even the way it was a little bit icky for me. It could have been a lot worse. I totally, you know, accept that, but probably my least favourite scene in the whole movie, unfortunately. However, in the preamble, I mentioned that I was kind of not sure that I liked the relationship between Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character and Bianca, Kat's sister, and while that's still kind of the case, like I don't care about them even remotely as much as I care about Kat and Patrick, it wasn't as bad as I remember it. So certainly Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character did get slightly kind of entitled to her time. I think the reason that I remember the car scene specifically is because he does this list of, I did all these things for you, I, you know, drove you to this place, and I learnt French for you and all this, and then, and you still wouldn't go out with me, or you were stringing me along or whatever. And that kind of came off as a bit entitled nice guy, and I think that's what I was remembering. But overall, I think it was fine, even if I wasn't particularly invested in that, particularly because, you know, I mean, Bianca's not meant to be entirely likeable. She is meant to be quite selfish and vain. But, you know, that did make it a little bit difficult to invest in the romance. And it was meant to be a secondary romance, so that's fine. Overall, the movie is so wonderful that I'm really just nitpicking at this point. I did actually think that the two Shakespeare nerds were cuter than the actual secondary couple of the film, so that was fun, and I actually didn't remember that had happened either. But any couple who falls in love over Shakespeare is totally fine in my book. I'm rooting for them, so yeah, that was a fun addition. I did love that Bianca was the one to defend herself against Joey at prom. I think that was probably my favourite moment of hers. Certainly glad that they gave that moment to her rather than to Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character. I think that that was much more in character and much more satisfying, and, you know, just have that bit of girl power moment at the end there was great to see. You know, I think it was a really good moment to show her and Kat coming to some kind of accord. You know, they're sisters, they love each other, they're not as different as they think they are, and so having them kind of find those paths that aren't so divergent as they thought was really a nice touch and a nice visual representation of the way that their relationship had grown. The real question, how do I feel about 10 Things I Hate About You? Well, I think the answer to that is pretty clear. I think it's delightful, charming, empowering, has great script, good direction, great acting, music choices were good. Literally, there's barely puts a foot wrong. So I think 10 Things I Hate About You is one of the best teen films out there, and am I going to keep it? Absolutely, particularly because I know that I can now watch this and not be overwhelmed with sadness about Heath Ledger. So what's up next time? Well, we're going back to action movies. 12 Rounds, starring John Cena. It's a WWE Studios film. So we're going to get some great action, and I am looking forward to it. So I will see you all then. Bye for now, and happy watching.